Blumenthal for partnering with us on this very important forum. I'm grateful for the witnesses for being with us today, and I think we're going to start with Senator Schumer.
Well, thank you, and thank all my colleagues for being here. I apologize for coming and going. I've got to open up the floor. It's one of the jobs that goes with the territory.
Well, you can kick us off, too. That's great.
Yes.
So.
Anyway, I want to thank both my good colleague Dick Blumenthal and, of course, Representative Raskin, Amy Klobuchar, and Deborah Ross and Pramila Jayapal, all for participating here. Now, last month's ruling against Live Nation and Ticketmaster was a victory for concertgoers, for musicians, independent venues, and a devastating defeat for the illegal monopoly that was screwing them over with higher event prices. With his sweetheart settlement for Ticketmaster, Donald Trump took the side of an illegal monopoly whose employees bragged about, quote, robbing fans blind. They just say it. They're bald about it. It's incredible. For a president who claimed he'd lower Americans' costs on day one, Trump sure likes cozying up to big businesses that are unfairly jacking up prices. Fortunately, more than 30 states, including our great Attorney General Tish James, said enough and won their suit. Make no mistake, we aren't out of the woods yet. Live Nation's going to fight tooth and nail. They always have. And against any divestments and corporate breakups. I've been going after them for a very long time, and they're still at it, unfortunately. Another slap on the wrist isn't going to be enough. We need to break up the monopoly. And more than that, the Ticketmaster case made clear that we cannot trust Donald Trump to enforce the antitrust laws that keep our markets competitive and our costs down. Instead of protecting competition, Trump's DOJ will protect his interests and those of his special interest cronies. The playbook is simple. Hire MAGA lobbyists, get your way. We've seen it time and time and time again. State attorneys general, led by Rob Bonta, are getting off the sidelines and back in the ring by exercising their antitrust authority. Senate Democrats are too. But we need Congress to assert its authorities and Republicans to fight for competitive and lower costs, not just for special interests. Whether it's groceries, streaming services, or concert tickets, if we want costs to go down, we can't let illegal monopolies off the hook. I thank you for being able to participate in this very important hearing, which I believe will be heard by ticket purchasers from one end of America to the other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Schumer. I'll now make my remarks before I turn it over to Senator Blumenthal. We're here today because millions of Americans have had the exact same experience of logging in to buy tickets to see music in concert and finding that the costs are extraordinarily high. And why are they so expensive? Because one corporate giant controls the entire live entertainment ecosystem, from the venues where concerts take place, to sales of the tickets, to artist bookings on their concert tours, to the concert promoters who organize the tours. That concentrated power and control and lack of competition defines nearly every aspect of live entertainment today. And not just musical entertainment, but sports as well. And it makes every part of the live entertainment industry more expensive for artists, for venues, and for fans alike. Ticketmaster Live Nation abuses its monopoly power to extract monopoly rents from every part of the system. And the warning signs have been flashing for decades. More than 30 years ago, Pearl Jam came to Washington and tried to warn us about Ticketmaster's growing dominance. They testified before Congress in 1994 and brought a spotlight to the problem, but Congress and the DOJ failed to take timely, effective action. In 2010, the merger between Live Nation and Ticketmaster combined the nation's dominant concert promoter with the nation's dominant ticketing company into one single vertically integrated giant, Live Nation Entertainment. The antitrust implications were profound. One corporation now had the power not simply to compete in the live entertainment industry, but to control it. And despite this monopoly power, the DOJ chose not to stop the merger. Instead, they entered into a 10-year consent decree that was ostensibly meant to address anti-competitive concerns, but in reality did nothing to alter the dynamics of monopoly control and profiteering. By 2019, It was clear Live Nation Entertainment had repeatedly violated the terms of its merger, but again, DOJ failed to successfully address the problem. Instead, the first Trump administration extended the consent decree for another 5.5 years with just a few additional terms imposed. Under President Biden, DOJ finally said enough is enough. When Assistant AG Jonathan Cantor announced the case in 2024, he succinctly stated the problem. The live music industry in America, he said, is broken because Live Nation Ticketmaster has an illegal monopoly. In 2024, when the department filed suit, it detailed a long list of abuses. The complaint alleged that Live Nation Ticketmaster threatens and retaliates against venues and conditions Live Nation concerts on a venue's use of Ticketmaster. The solution was plain. Quote, our antitrust lawsuit, said the Assistant AG, seeks to break up Live Nation Ticketmaster's monopoly and restore competition for the benefit of fans and artists. DOJ was joined in this lawsuit significantly by 39 states and the District of Columbia, Democratic and Republican AGs alike. And then came the second Trump administration. Earlier this year, after years of investigation, despite massive amounts of voluminous evidence of monopolistic conduct, and after taking the case all the way to trial, the Trump administration suddenly cut a deal requiring the payment of $280 million in civil penalties, an amount that represents a trivial and pathetic slap on the wrist, roughly just 4 days of the company's revenues in 2025. The settlement did nothing at all for consumers, artists, industry workers, or venues. Live Nation Entertainment promised to continue, quote, business as usual. Frankly, the settlement makes no sense unless one considers its timing and context. Last year, the Trump administration's head of the Antitrust Division, Gail Slater, was vocal in her support for the litigation. It was widely reported she opposed this settlement. By February, she'd been fired. She was gone. One of our witnesses today, Professor Alford, has already testified before the House Judiciary Committee about the corruption of the Department of Justice under former Attorney General Pam Bondi. Professor Alford served as Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General, or rather Principal Deputy Attorney General in the Antitrust Division before he was fired for standing up for rigorous and impartial enforcement of the law. He had a front row seat to observe the network of Trump allies and MAGA power brokers who wander the halls of the Department of Justice trying to work around the expert civil servants and instead to cut sweetheart deals for their business clients. When DOJ finalized its settlement with Live Nation Ticketmaster, it did so in secret without informing the lead prosecutor, much less the court, as the case continued. And when the secret agreement was announced, Judge Subramanian was furious. He called it absolute disrespect for the court, the jury, and the entire process. Now, here's the critical point. When the Trump administration folded at the 11th hour, the states did not. 33 of the 39 states that had joined DOJ's original case refused to surrender, refused to give in. And that bipartisan group of state AGs continued to fight back. California Attorney General Rob Bonta, who is here with us today, will tell us why they and why he chose to keep fighting, and also what it is like to take over a complex federal trial midstream so that the consumers, the workers, and the artists would still be represented. Last month, the American people reaped the benefit of that brave effort when a federal jury unanimously found Live Nation Ticketmaster guilty under the Sherman Act for unlawful monopolization of the live entertainment market. The exhaustive 11-page verdict listed 13 separate antitrust violations, such as monopolizing the market in primary ticketing services to major concert venues, and willfully acquiring and retaining monopoly power in the primary ticketing market. It also made a finding of competitive harms affecting each of the state and district plaintiffs and in all of the states, and it detailed the overcharges associated with any tickets sold at any and all major concert venues, specifying that the average overcharge for each ticket sold in America for each customer at the major concert venues was $1.72 for a period of decades. adding up. I don't know exactly what that is, but it's got to be hundreds of millions of dollars. We'll have somebody figure out what it is. The trial now moves into the remedies phase, and the question before us is how the court will finish the job in this extraordinary case. If our system has any hope of reining in monopolies and protecting American consumers, not just in this sector, but in any sector, then the remedies for violations this profound must be searching and comprehensive. If the structure of Live Nation Ticketmaster virtually guarantees anti-competitive conduct, then structural remedies must obviously be on the table, including divestiture, including breakup. The remedy must address the scope and the magnitude of the violation. This notion should not be controversial when the harm to an entire economic ecosystem is so plain and so pervasive. Federal courts used the same laws to break up Standard Oil back in 1911 and AT&T in 1982. When concentrated power threatens competitive freedom, our system must have the resources and must have the courage to take the steps necessary to restore real competition. What happens next is in the hands of the judge, but the system will have failed us if a weak remedial half measure is simply going to be incorporated as the cost of doing business for a monopoly. While the court considers the right remedy, it will also review the terms of the administration's proposed settlement. Under the Tunney Act, it is the court's responsibility to determine whether the settlement is truly in the public interest, a principle, by the way, that's at stake today also as the Department of Justice tries to engage in a settlement with Donald Trump, and we hope that the court will maintain jurisdiction and not allow this corrupt $1.7 billion slush fund to be created against the interests of the American people. The Tunney Act is a critically important guardrail against the kind of corrupt deals and bargains that the Trump administration has been hell-bent on advancing at every opportunity. I'm pleased to have joined forces with Senator Klobuchar to introduce the Antitrust Accountability and Transparency Act, legislation designed to ensure that the settlements protect the consumers, the workers, and small businesses that are the real stakeholders in antitrust law and not Trump's lieutenants, sycophants, and favorite corporate conglomerates. The bottom line is the American people deserve an economy in which artists can thrive without coercion, where independent venues can thrive without coercion, where innovation is possible, and where consumers are treated as something more than captive revenue streams. We deserve a system that actually serves the public, which is the purpose of the antitrust laws. I'll close with this one thought. Even after a unanimous verdict that Live Nation Ticketmaster has broken the law, and even though state attorney generals across America are still in the fight and pursuing a meaningful remedy, it's clear that artists and venue owners across the country are still seriously afraid of the power of this monopoly. They fear reprisals for speaking out about all of the abuses and injustices and ripoffs. Many of the performers we asked to testify here today at this event would not make themselves available for fear that Live Nation Entertainment would take away their livelihood. These dynamics underscore the unhealthy concentration of power in this industry. But in America, just as we have no kings or royalty in government, we have no kings or royalty in the economy. We need to restore meaningful competition. I thank our witnesses for their courage today, and I turn it over to you, Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks so much, Congressman Raskin. Thanks for that very powerful statement. Thanks for your partnering on this effort. And thanks to all of our witnesses. I'll just kind of put an exclamation mark on one point that Congressman Raskin made, which is that we are depending on our state attorneys general. Again, a phenomenon not unknown to America, as I can attest from having served as Attorney General of the state of Connecticut for 20 years in exactly these kinds of multi-state actions where states had to pursue justice even after the federal government abandoned the fight. We're here today at the beginning of the concert season. A lot of people are looking forward to going to see their favorite artists and bringing their families and having affordable access. And it will be denied them because of Ticketmaster, Live Nations, and tactics that it has repeated over the years again and again and again. I met this morning with a venue owner, the Webster Theater in Hartford, and he described to me some of the bullying, heavy-handed tactics that Ticketmaster and Live Nation have used to pressure artists to leave his venue and go to others owned by Live Nation in Connecticut, where Live Nation doesn't own the venues. It often controls them through long-term contracts. And it pressures the artists to go with them, saying they won't be able to appear, their tickets won't be sold. This kind of bullying use of market dominance is classic violation of antitrust laws. And Ticketmaster Live Nation has been able to get away with it because of lack of enforcement against them. We have urged, many of us in the Congress, that there be action by the Department of Justice. Senator Klobuchar has been a leader, others in the House as well, urging that there be more effective law enforcement. The law is dead letter if it's not enforced. And just last March, I produced a report after a number of years that showed the tactics at work, how Live Nation pressured artists to put their tickets on sale in the secondary market for resale before they were offered to the public, causing skyrocketing prices for those tickets. How they pressured artists and venues to do dynamic pricing. A lot of Americans have no idea what dynamic pricing is, but it is essentially raising prices in response to increasing demand. And as you can see from this poster, the use of dynamic pricing increased 700% in just 3 years, from 2019 to 2022. That is monopolistic manipulation at work. These tactics include a lot of variations on the theme, but the bottom line here is twofold. Number one, corporate greed and concentration. They do it because they can, and they can because they control 80%. That's another number I'd like you to remember. 80% of all the ticket sales in the country. Very few industries have that kind of concentration. But it's also about corruption. The Department of Justice won this case. A jury said, in effect, to Ticketmaster Live Nation, you are guilty. Not criminally, but in effect, you did it. You're liable. You're responsible. And then the Department of Justice threw in the towel. They entered a sweetheart deal with Ticketmaster Live Nation, a meager, trivial amount of money to be paid, as Congressman Raskin said, and a few minor conditions, including the divestment of some of their control over venues. Nada. Nothing really effective to help consumers. Why? The why question is the corruption question. They did it because of fixers and lobbyists who actually had worked in the administration and were able to bring influence to bear on the Department of Justice to skew law enforcement in a corruption scheme that undermines the very credibility of that great institution that many of us who work there have revered, the Department of Justice. So where we are right now is a clear path. Number one, break up the company. Not novel or original as a remedy, been done before. There may be no instance of monopolistic wrongful use of power than this one that merits the breakup of this company. After all, it was the result of a merger, not organic growth. They didn't get there by working harder and building from the ground up. They did a merger that many of us opposed, and we've urged for years that it be broken up. And then a price cap on secondary market prices. There ought to be some fairness here so that consumers are not, in effect, exploited by the scalpers and the secondary market sellers. And third, the Junk Fee Prevention Act, which I've advocated, that basically says if you offer a price, that ought to be the price that consumers, fans, concert goers have to pay, not a price that has all kinds of hidden fees and charges that can increase them literally by 25%. I'm not making that number up. That is what we found in our investigation. So I'm really looking forward to these witnesses who have so much knowledge, but I think ultimately we're going to rely again on state enforcers, our state attorneys general, and ultimately the power of the court to act in the public interest. That's the reason why we have an independent judiciary. That's the reason that the president's proposed slush fund for $1.8 billion as a settlement of his lawsuit. Remember, it's his lawsuit against the government he controls. And that settlement is, again, a perfect example of corruption. He likes to say he's made perfect statements. This kind of compromise of the public interest in the Live Nation Ticketmaster case is also an example of corruption. And the court can put a halt to it. I hope it will. And I'll turn it now back to Chairman Raskin.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal, for those trenchant remarks and for your general leadership in the field. We're joined now by the best possible witnesses we could find to discuss our topic today. So let me start by introducing State Attorney General Rob Bonta, who is the 34th Attorney General of the state of California. He's been in that position since 2021. He leads the DOJ in California in addressing some of the nation's biggest problems, chief among them the incorrigible lawlessness and authoritarianism of this administration. He has led several efforts to enforce the antitrust laws with real muscle, including delivering a victorious lawsuit against Amazon's anti-competitive pricing practices. Alongside a bipartisan coalition of AGs, he continued the landmark antitrust lawsuit we're talking about today against Live Nation Ticketmaster. Professor Roger Alford is the former Trump administration principal deputy assistant AG. He's a professor at Notre Dame Law School. He also served in the DOJ during President Trump's first term. In July of 2025, he was fired for insubordination after pushing back on the department's allegedly corrupt approval of the merger between Hewlett-Packard Enterprises and Juniper Networks. He has blown the whistle on corruption at the Department of Justice and appeared as the minority witness for a December 2025 hearing in the House Judiciary Subcommittee on the Administrative State Regulatory Reform and Antitrust to call on Congress to conduct oversight of the DOJ. We're very happy to welcome you back again today, Professor Alford. Franz Nicolai is a renowned musician and writer with the popular indie rock band, The Hold Steady. He is a musician, he's a songwriter, and he's a writer. He's currently a faculty member in music and written arts at Bard College. He lives in upstate New York. In addition to records under his own name, he was a member of the Hold Steady, World Inferno Society, and the Agit Punks Against Me. As a member of these bands, he's appeared on Jimmy Kimmel Live and Showtime's Billions. He's written many books, including Band Life, Life and Work in Popular Music, which was named a Best Music Book of the Year in 2024 by Rolling Stone. And now Senator Blumenthal will introduce our other witnesses.
We're pleased to welcome Jerry Mickelson, who's a Chicago promoter. He organizes large shows at theaters and in arenas. He has a long history of going after Live Nation and even testified before Congress in 2010 when Live Nation's merger with Ticketmaster was initially considered, warning that, quote, a large proportion of the nation's live entertainment industry would be seriously, if not irreparably, impaired by a Live Nation Ticketmaster merger, end quote. Mr. Mickelson testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee in a hearing regarding Taylor Swift Eras Tour, which I remember well. That debacle occurred in 2023, pointing out the monopoly's various anti-competitive practices and emphasizing the urgency to enforce antitrust legislation. We appreciate your coming back to keep us on task, Mr. Mickelson. Mr. Tom DeGeorge is the owner of the Crowbar in Tampa. The Crowbar closed on July 31, 2025, because doing business in the live entertainment sector has become too difficult. It was announced earlier this year that a Live Nation venue will be moving into the neighborhood where his venue had been for 20 years after he closed. Importantly, Tampa, Florida music scene was included in the evidence at the trial. Mr. DeGeorge has long been an advocate for independent venues and small businesses. Additionally, he's spoken out about the various challenges small venues face, in large part due to the Live Nation Ticketmaster monopoly, which has, quote, wanted the whole industry to themselves, end quote, as he has said, since the early 2000s. I want to thank all the witnesses for being here. You're all really frontline warriors in this battle for competitive pricing that is essential to fans, concert goers, artists, venues. Thank you. And now I think we're going to have testimony first by AG Bonta.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to join you. Rob Bonta, California Attorney General. It's an honor to be here. I want to say it's a privilege to be part of this esteemed panel, and I look forward to the testimony of my colleagues up here. I also want to say thank you and share my sincere gratitude to Senator Blumenthal, Representative Raskin, for convening this hearing, for shining a light on this issue broadly, but also this specific antitrust case that impacts everyday Americans and their wallets. Live Nation and Ticketmaster's unlawful anti-competitive domination over ticketing and promotion, it hurts fans, it hurts artists, and it hurts businesses nationwide. The company overcharged fans and delivered a, frankly, terrible ticketing experience. It locked up venues through restrictive, long-term exclusive agreements and threats to block them from tours and from artists. And it leveraged its extensive network of venues to force artists to use Live Nation as a promoter, which is why our bipartisan coalition of more than 30 attorneys general and originally the US DOJ joined forces in 2024 to take Live Nation to court for violating the Sherman Antitrust Act. Our case was strong. As referenced, we had employee Slack messages that mocked customers for being, quote, so stupid, and saying the company was, quote, robbing them blind, baby. We had a recorded phone call where Live Nation's CEO threatened to steer shows away from the Barclays Center in Brooklyn if they went with competitor SeatGeek, a threat they later made good on. In just the first week of trial, we'd already heard in court that Live Nation fully intended to take advantage of fans and were able to because fans had no other options. So you can imagine our shock and our disappointment when the Trump administration abruptly threw in the towel and settled out its claims days into trial. Our coalition of blue and red states refused to lose steam without the feds on board. We stayed in the fight, we made our case, and secured a historic and resounding victory on all of our claims. And let me just add a little more specifics to that. The jury was presented with a 11-page jury verdict form, 33 questions. And in the response, in filling out that jury verdict form, the jury found against Live Nation and Ticketmaster on every single question posed to them. That speaks volumes. Our case is proof of just how far states can and will go to protect our residents and our businesses from big corporations using their power to illegally raise prices and rip off Americans. And we will do that with or without the federal administration. I've stressed the bipartisan nature of this case because antitrust enforcement is about fighting for affordability, a fight that should be just plain American, regardless of your state or your side of the aisle, be it tickets or groceries, cable, streaming services, internet, clothing, or even pet food. When we go after corporations that monopolize markets, that collude to fix prices, or merge to knock out competition, we're fighting to make life more affordable for everyday people, for our neighbors, for Americans. That's something we should all be able to get behind. Until recently, it's work that has often been shared between the states and the federal government. Sometimes, like with our recent agri-stats settlement, it still is. But more and more, President Trump and his administration seem to have abandoned the fight for a free and fair market and abdicated their role to hold the corporations accountable to the law. State AGs have been left with no choice but to step up to the plate, ready to go, and we are. As this country's affordability crisis worsens, and unfortunately as the federal government pursues policies that will only exacerbate it, it's critical that our states continue to exercise the enforcement power we have to stand up for consumers, safeguard competition, and prevent big corporations from breaking the law and ripping off consumers. Antitrust enforcement is democracy's check on oligarchy, a check on wealthy businesses seeking to game the system and knock out competition for their own gain, trampling over consumers, workers, and our free market as they go. A check on billionaires currying favor with the president so he'll do their bidding. A check on the elite few who think they're above the law when they're not. No one is. Antitrust enforcement protects businesses that follow the law. It levels the playing field for businesses to grow and thrive based on what they put out in the market. And it ensures that all Americans can participate in and benefit from a vibrant economy, not just well-connected businesses, shareholders, and those who have means to participate in the stock market. If you need proof that antitrust enforcement works, just look at California. We're the fourth largest economy in the world, home to more Fortune 500 companies than any other state, home to nearly 2/3 of all U.S. venture capital investment, and we have some of the strongest antitrust and consumer protections on the books. That's no accident. I want to say again, thank you for your interest in this case and this topic. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be here. I look forward to our dialogue today and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thanks, General Bonta. We're going to turn to Jerry Mickelson now.
Thank you, Ranking Member Blumenthal, Ranking Member Raskin, and the members of the House and Senate for allowing me to testify today regarding the competitive harms caused by the merger of Live Nation and Ticketmaster. My name is Jerry Mickelson, President and CEO of Jam Productions, an independent concert promotion company headquartered in Chicago that I co-founded in 1972. For more than 54 years, I have promoted concerts and operated 3 venues in Chicago and 1 in St. Paul. I still love this business and the profession that has defined my life. But over the course of many years, I have watched Live Nation and Ticketmaster systematically consolidate and weaponize their market power to transform the live entertainment industry into a rigged ecosystem where meaningful competition is not merely difficult, it is deliberately suffocated. To put it in perspective, in 1996, Jam Productions produced approximately 130 arena concerts, which was the most profitable segment of our company. By 2025, that number had fallen to just 4, a 97% decline. That collapse was not due to a lack of experience, relationships, or success, but rather the result of a marketplace that has, over the course of many years, become dominated and controlled by Live Nation at the expense of its competitors. The reality is simple. When one company controls the dominant ticket system, most of the major tours, the artists they manage and the ones they do not, and the major venues, and possesses the ability to reward or punish artists, managers, and buildings, independent competition becomes almost impossible to sustain. What happened to Jam Productions was not the result of a free and competitive marketplace. It was the predictable outcome of unchecked, abusive market control. I warned Congress in 2009 during the Senate hearings that this merger would lead to exactly the kind of market domination we are witnessing today. At those hearings, Live Nation Entertainment and Ticketmaster assured regulators that combining the nation's largest concert promoter with the dominant ticketing company would increase competition, spur innovation, and benefit consumers. Those promises were not merely wrong, they were devastatingly false. The DOJ made a catastrophic mistake in 2010 when it approved the Live Nation and Ticketmaster merger through a consent decree built around weak behavioral remedies instead of halting the unification of these two Goliaths. At the time, critics, including myself, warned that allowing a vertically integrated giant to police itself would fail spectacularly. We were right. What followed was not increased competition, but unprecedented consolidation of power. Ticket prices exploded. Service fees skyrocketed. Independent promoters and ticketing companies were marginalized, and artists, managers, and buildings became increasingly dependent upon a single vertically integrated corporation that now exerts enormous control over nearly every aspect of the live entertainment business. By 2019, even the DOJ itself concluded that Live Nation had violated the consent decree by retaliating against and threatening venues that considered moving their ticketing business away from Ticketmaster. In other words, the very conduct regulators claimed would not occur after the merger was happening. Yet, despite clear evidence that the decree had failed, the government still refused to unwind the company, instead merely extended the same ineffective behavioral restrictions that the company had already demonstrated it was willing to ignore. Behavioral remedies have repeatedly proven meaningless against a corporation with overwhelmingly market power, massive financial resources, and control. Such remedies require perpetual government oversight of an industry titan whose economic leverage allows it to pressure competitors, venues, artists, and managers behind closed doors in ways that are extraordinarily difficult to detect and even harder to police in real time. This is precisely why antitrust law has historically favored structural remedies in monopoly cases. When a company becomes too dominant, too vertically integrated, and too powerful to regulate through promises and consent decrees, the only effective solution is structural separation. Competition cannot truly exist while one corporation controls the pipelines of the live entertainment industry from the artist to the fan. The damage inflicted upon consumers has been equally profound. According to Pollstar data, the average ticket price for the top 100 tours rose from approximately $26 in 1996 to more than $134 in 2025. Fans are now forced to navigate skyrocketing ticket prices, inflated resale markets, dynamic pricing schemes, platinum pricing manipulation, and excessive service fees that often bear little relationship to the underlying value of the ticket itself. Meanwhile, consumers have fewer meaningful alternatives because the marketplace has become increasingly concentrated under one dominant corporate structure. Live Nation has become so politically and economically powerful that it appears capable of exerting extraordinary influence to obtain the outcome it wants. That reality was on full display this past March when the company aggressively maneuvered to steer the DOJ away from pursuing meaningful structural remedies, including break up Live Nation and Ticketmaster. Public reporting and commentary surrounding the antitrust litigation described a politically connected influence network operating around the settlement discussions to help pressure the government towards settlement and away from the type of structural relief necessary to restore meaningful competition in the live entertainment industry. The central antitrust question is straightforward. Did Live Nation and Ticketmaster achieve their dominance through superior innovation and fair competition, or through a market structure designed to suppress meaningful competition before it could emerge? Having competed against them for decades, I can say unequivocally that this level of dominance was not achieved simply because they outperformed everybody else. It was accomplished through a vertical integration, exclusionary conduct, retaliatory leverage over venues and artists, strategic acquisitions, and the relentless abuse of market power across interconnected industries. This is a classic example of monopoly leveraging, using market power in promotion, venues, and touring to strengthen control over ticketing and suppress meaningful competition throughout the live entertainment industry. Structural remedies are needed here. The Paramount decrees reflected the government's recognition that no company should simultaneously control film production, distribution, and theaters. Regulators understood that when a single corporation controls both the content and the means of distribution, competition inevitably collapses and consumers ultimately suffer. The exact same principle applies here. Live Nation and Ticketmaster must be structurally separated, including divestiture of all of their venues, including stadiums, amphitheaters, arenas, theaters, clubs, outdoor spaces, and other venues, and festival properties they control, artist management companies, merchandise businesses, and any other segment of the live entertainment industry that enables them to leverage dominance in one market to suppress competition and expand power in another. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Mr. Mickelson. We'll turn now to Mr. Nicolai.
Good afternoon. My name is Franz Nicolai. I've been a professional touring and recording musician for almost 30 years. I've played on almost 200 records and over 2,000 concerts all over the world, as far as Siberia, Mongolia, and China. I've played Carnegie Hall, and I've played no-name punk houses. I'm a rock and roll lifer with a sideline in writing and teaching. I give my credentials in brief because I don't expect anyone in this room to know my name. The music industry obviously is always going to focus on the Taylor Swifts and Bruce Springsteens, but the monopolistic forces that control the industry equally affect the broad popular music middle class, the non-famous music workers who've been the focus of my writing and my lived experience. When we talk about the US economy, the headlines focus on the biggest firms, but we all understand that the effects are felt by the millions of semi-anonymous individual entrepreneurs and small businesses. The same is true in the music economy. Our business today lives and dies on ticket sales and on the merchandise we sell at those concerts. For example, my income from the music over the last 5 years averages about 10% from record royalties and 90% from live performance and the merchandise we sell at those shows. We are no longer really in the recording business, we're in the performance business. But this also means we're in the repeat customer and customer service business. Being in a rock band in the 21st century is not the Dionysian bacchanalia conjured up by the term rock star. Those of us lucky enough to do this are middle-class proprietors of small businesses, which we've built over many years, and which depend, like any small business, on maintaining a healthy relationship with loyal customers, or as we call them, fans. This means we're not in the business of squeezing every penny out of them at every opportunity and maximizing our profit in every transaction. What the middle-class musician wants is not a fan who spends $2,000 for a stadium concert once, but one who can afford a ticket with enough left over to buy a t-shirt, a poster, a couple drinks, which benefits our friends at the independent venues, and has the kind of good time that makes them want to come back next year when we return. They want to feel like we're in this together, band and audience, from a place of mutual respect, not that their love for what we do is being exploited. We're like the local general store in a small town. We may be the only place that offers the things our friends and neighbors need, but that doesn't mean we want to take advantage of them. We want them as friendly, loyal, repeat customers who feel themselves to be members of the community we establish through our music. But we're also, to fans, the face of ticket sales. So if concert tickets sell out in seconds and instantly appear on secondary markets for 5 times the price, or if mysterious fees add 20 or 30% at checkout, they can't complain to Ticketmaster, they come to our Facebook page. So business practices we can't control hurt our crucial relationship with our fan community. In a healthy competitive market with multiple independent venues, promotion, and ticketing options, predatory fee schemes could be avoided without the burden falling on the relationship between artists and our audiences. But live music hasn't been a healthy competitive market. Instead, a vertically integrated corporation that controls venues and tour promotion and ticketing and artist management to the almost total control of many music markets is, to a comical degree, the epitome of the kind of monopolistic power that antitrust law was created to address. We as artists simply don't have the range of city-to-city, venue-to-venue choices that would constitute a healthy ecosystem, as non-Live Nation venues are consolidated or forced out of business or feel pressured to adopt extractive Live Nation policies to stay afloat. And we're in solidarity with independent venues and promoters because they gave us gigs when we didn't have any fans and helped us build what we've been able to build. So we ask that ticket resale and speculation be capped at or near face value so that our fans are not being exploited at no benefit to us, the artists. We ask for full transparency about fees, going further than the floor set by the FTC rule, so fans are aware who's responsible for higher ticket prices. We hope that the remedies phase of the lawsuit results in the breakup, which doesn't just separate Ticketmaster from Live Nation, but also separates the venue and artist management businesses from their tour promotion businesses. We simply want to be able to retain and manage the relationship between musician and audience without the influence of extractive corporate power. We try to do business in a sustainable way that embodies respect for fans rather than squeezing every last dollar from them. And we want the opportunity to partner with companies who share those values. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nicolai. Mr. DeGeorge, you're up.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me here today. My name is Tom DeGeorge. I am an independent venue owner in Tampa, Florida. In 1996, I visited a music venue called The Masquerade in Atlanta, Georgia, an old historic mill that was one of the coolest spaces I had ever seen. And in that moment, I knew I wanted to work in this industry for the rest of my life, even if my parents thought I was crazy for it. At just 24, I became the general manager of The Masquerade and later relocated to Tampa to run its sister venue. And in 2006, I opened up my own small music venue in Ybor City called Crowbar. I think that is when my mom and dad finally saw what I saw and were proud of me for forging my own path. And after years and years and lots of hard work, young artists began to tell me that when they imagined touring someday and when they dreamed of playing one of those stops in my 300 capacity room. Crowbar in every independent venue is dealing with ticket scalping bots, inflation, local development fights, and just trying to survive as independents in markets dominated by corporate giants. We fought for the breakup of Live Nation. These two experiences show what that fight looks like. In 2022, I got an email from AEG asking to hold dates at Crowbar for an artist named Jake Wesley Rogers. We confirmed a date, and we were ready to announce when I got a call saying Live Nation had obtained the rights to the tour. I had no agreement with Live Nation, and I wasn't willing to work with them. I'd been very outspoken about the company, and I wanted to stand by that. I wanted to stand on my word. Well, then I got a call saying that Jake wanted to keep the kickoff date at Crowbar, and I was able to do it on my own without Live Nation. It took the artist speaking up for me to overcome the monopoly, and that doesn't happen every day. But to keep that show in the room, I also needed to match Live Nation's offer, which was roughly twice what I would have paid booking it myself. Live Nation can overbid, lose money on shows, and absorb it all because they make billions through Ticketmaster and every other part of this industry that they have their hands in. When it's your own room, every show has to make financial sense. There is no level playing field with the monopoly. In 2025, I was invited to a roundtable discussion with then DOJ Antitrust Chief Gail Slater. I shared the experience I just spoke of, and I told her that Live Nation trial was a matter of life and death for independent venues. She made me feel heard. She seemed to really care about this fight, and she seemed invested in it. And after we were done, we took pictures, and Gail asked if we could do the thumbs up like President Trump, and I asked her if we could do the fist instead like the fist of justice. She posted that photo on her X account, and as a criminal justice graduate, it was a moment I was extremely proud of. We lost our mom a couple years earlier, and my dad's health was really struggling, and so I was happy to be able to share it with him and show him what I had done before he passed a few months later. On February 12th, 2026, Gail was removed from her position days before the Live Nation trial began. Then 3 days into the trial, the DOJ settled with Live Nation for an amount that's only one weekend of sales for that company. For those of us who have spent years trying to bring culture to our communities, it was all very hard to stomach. Independent venues and thousands of fans reached out to the state attorney generals, begging them to continue the case, and thank God they did. Because a jury delivered a verdict that so many of us already knew. Live Nation isn't a legal monopoly. And the trial established that their leverage for the monopoly, especially in ticketing, is the tours. When they control the tours, they decide every city, every venue, every ticket price, every ticketing platform, and which fans can even afford to walk through the door, for the first date to the last. The independent venue in the city never even gets a phone call. There's nothing left to bid on. We need at least a 50% tour cap would fix this. It means that when a major artist hits the road, at least half of those dates have to be put out to real competition. The regional promoters and independent venues who actually know their cities and their fans. And when Live Nation doesn't have the leverage to coerce, more venues have control of their ticketing and more fans have access to shows that don't cost them a week's paycheck. A breakup needs to happen, but if Live Nation is still controlling the tours, they still control the industry. After 20 years, my venue will close on July 31st of this year. Last month, Live Nation announced plans to build a 4,300 cap venue in my venue's neighborhood. That is how this happens, not with a knockout punch, but slowly, show by show, year by year, until one day you read that a brand new Live Nation venue is coming into your neighborhood while the small independent venue you spent decades building through hard work is closing its doors. I don't want to live in a country where rooms like mine no longer survive. I'm here today not asking for your pity or special treatment, but on behalf of my community, asking for a fair shot. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. DeGeorge. Now, Professor Alford.
Ranking Member Blumenthal and Raskin and members of the committee, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I look forward to discussing with you the Department of Justice's shocking settlement in the Live Nation Ticketmaster case. I speak on behalf of traditional Republicans who care deeply about the rule of law and the vigorous enforcement of antitrust laws to protect the average American. This is an 80-20 issue for the public and a 60-40 issue for Republican state AGs who refused to settle in this case. Why, we traditional Republicans ask, have the rich men north of Richmond betrayed the hardworking Americans who struggle to enjoy the simple pleasures of life? If music is good for the soul, then why can so few afford it? And why would we give up the chance to do something about it? The answer is the DOJ has abused its prosecutorial discretion to reach a settlement that I predict will be found to not be in the public interest. Attorney General Robert Jackson highlighted the problem in a now famous speech in 1940. If the prosecutor is obliged to choose his case, it follows that he can choose his defendants. Therein is the most dangerous power of the prosecutor. When the prosecutor picks some person whom he dislikes or desires to embarrass and then looks for an offense, that is the greatest danger of abuse. It is here that the law enforcement becomes personal. If selective prosecution of one's enemies is the most dangerous abuse of discretion, selective non-prosecution of one's allies is a close second. One could paraphrase the inverse problem as follows. When the prosecutor picks some person whom he likes or desires to favor and then looks for an excuse to not prosecute, that is one of the greatest dangers of abuse. It is here that law enforcement becomes personal. Unfortunately, during my tenure at the DOJ, I personally witnessed the abuse of prosecutorial discretion. Such abuses harm the DOJ's reputation and the American economy. The previous antitrust scandals that I discussed in my written testimony, the HB Juniper merger scandal, the pardon of Tim Lewicki, the clearance of Compass Anywhere, and Nexstar Tegna, are all a prelude to the current crisis in Live Nation. Part of the reason that the settlement in this case was so unsettling is that it undermined traditional norms in a case that is of great significance to the American public. One would hope that institutional and personal integrity would have protected against such prosecutorial abuse, but unfortunately that has not happened. With respect to institutional integrity of the Department of Justice, the Trump administration appears to be applying a theory of the unitary executive that conflates presidential accountability with direct political influence. As Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche recently confirmed, the President and other White House and cabinet officials now feel free to intervene at a granular level and influence the decisions of prosecutors with respect to antitrust investigations, prosecutions, and settlements. Given the billions of dollars that are at stake, the practice invites political allies to lobby their friends in high office for specific results. The rule of law quickly becomes the rule of lobbyists, and the great danger of law enforcement becoming personal is realized for the benefit of some and to the detriment of others. With respect to personal integrity, in the Antitrust Division, Assistant Attorney General Gail Slater and many of her deputies, including me, paid a professional price for refusing to abuse their prosecutorial discretion. As one senior career attorney put it to me, there are certain lines you cannot cross, and when that moment came, I had no choice but to quietly resign. For me, Catholic social teaching is instructive on what personal integrity requires. Political corruption is one of the most serious deformities of any democracy. Government officials must exercise their authority in an ethical manner in pursuit of the common good. When they make political choices that favor the narrow objectives of those with influence, they create obstacles to bring about the common good. Pursuit of private advantage, including one's own career advancement, is not in the pursuit of the common good. Even if government officials do not have a corrupt intent, they are still responsible when they materially cooperate in the corruption, particularly if they, 1, approve, facilitate, or participate in the corruption, 2, fail to hinder or disclose the corruption, or 3, protect those engaged in corruption by deceiving others as to its existence. Standing up to corruption requires courage, including firmness in difficulties and constancy in pursuit of the common good. If internal checks of institutional and personal integrity will not correct the problem, then inevitably there will be external checks. These external checks include political defeats in upcoming elections, emboldened state attorneys general, private challenges to mergers, more state merger notification laws, heightened judicial scrutiny under the Tunney Act, a rejection of the presumption of regularity, increased congressional oversight such as this, and potential legislative reforms. Unless something dramatically changes, prosecutorial abuse and the backlash against it will be the legacy of the Antitrust Division in the second Trump administration. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Professor Alford. Thank you, all of you, for those really powerful, eloquent statements. If we were in a normal committee meeting, I would say that all of your statements should be entered into the record in full. And we will, at some point, I guarantee, enter them into a record in full when we control committee hearings and we're sitting up there, not down here. But I just want to assure you that the numbers of people watching the live stream are many multiples what the audience normally is for our conventional hearings. So you've attracted a lot of viewers, and they're watching you, and I think taking heart from what you have told us here. Ranking Member Raskin, if you have no objection, I'd like to turn to Senator Klobuchar.
Well, thank you very much to both of you, to all of you. And it was good to see you, Mr. Mickelson. I maybe was a little more fun when I last saw you at the Bruce Springsteen concert, but not quite. And AG Bonta, thank you for working with our Attorney General, Keith Ellison, on these cases. And Mr. Nicolay, we did have a witness like yourself when I had the original Ticketmaster hearing a few years ago that kind of sparked major discussions and bills. and that was Clyde Lawrence of the band Lawrence. And every time he turned around, everyone thought he was talking to his lawyer, but it was his saxophone player. And I remember that well. And Mr. DeGeorge, we have a version of you and Mr. Mickelson in Minnesota, and Dana Frank, who owns First Avenue and has been such a leader on Save Our Stages, a bill that Senator Cornyn and I did together, as well as this work. But I'm going to start with the guy who stood up and lost his job over all of this. And I loved your openings, Mr. Alford. Could you talk about the effects on consumers when the Justice Department makes decisions based on political considerations instead of legal merits? And I appreciated you making the through line to corruption and how all of this has been handled.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the critical question is, are these decisions being decided on the merits? And if there are political influence, undue influence that occurs in which decisions are made not on the merits, but based on political connections or personal favors, then what happens is the very essence of what the Antitrust Division is supposed to do, which is address anti-competitive mergers, to address cartel behavior and monopoly abuse, all of those issues don't get rectified. And so cases don't get brought, cases that get settled that shouldn't get settled, and mergers go through that shouldn't go through.
You talked about how called yourself a traditional Republican, which I appreciated, and you also mentioned what happened there was so many people were fired, and then a lot of other people, career people, left because of this. These cases are some of the hardest legal cases in the legal system in America. Talk about how the hollowing out of career people, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, will affect competition policy going forward.
Yeah, truly what has happened in the past few months is we've lost some of the absolute best economists and lawyers at the Antitrust Division, people that have been there for decades. And so it will be, they're irreplaceable, truly. And so it will take years and years to try to recover and build back up the strength that we had at the start of the Trump administration.
Congressman Raskin mentioned the bill that we have worked on together, the Antitrust Accountability and Transparency Act, to ensure that courts have the tools to independently review settlements and approve only those that benefit the American people. How would passing this bill help ensure that antitrust settlements actually benefit consumers and preserve competition instead of rewarding political allies?
So the bill that you introduced, I endorsed, and I'm very happy that Representative Raskin is also introducing it in the House. The Tunney Act has not proven to be effective to address settlements that are not in the public interest. The original Tunney Act was passed after Watergate because of bribery issues with respect to President Nixon and payments made by ITT to the Republican National Convention. That law was passed to try to make sure that any settlements that occur in the public interest, but obviously it has not proven to be effective. And so it's possible, it's hopeful, that in this particular case where the judge has both a jury verdict where he is required to assess remedies that will fix the market, and at the same time look at the settlement, this may be one of those rare cases where the Tunney Act is meaningful. But otherwise, we need a strengthening of the Tunney Act in the legislation you're proposing.
Rapid round here at the end, Attorney General. Why is it so important for the court to impose remedies in the cases that, the case you brought, over what that settlement was, that was just a complete sellout?
The United States Department of Justice's settlement, of course, has been mentioned, was a slap on the wrist. It was a sweetheart deal. It was weak. It was inadequate. It was insufficient. It didn't have the people of this country's best interests in mind. And so that's why we fought on as states, and we got the best possible result in the liability phase, a jury verdict that completely 100% found for the states on all issues presented to the jury. And now we're in the remedies phase. And as discussed, the behavioral remedies have proven inadequate. It's time for structural remedies. We have requested that. We will request that, whether it be a divestiture of Ticketmaster and a full breakup of the two companies, or even a potential separation of the venue and artist management components of the industry. That's what we need at this point, and the U.S. DOJ settlement didn't come anywhere close to that.
Completely agree. Last, very quickly, Mr. Mickelson, in non-legal language there, talk to us about why breaking up the company would be so important.
we can't compete. And when I say we, any other promoter that has to try and make a business out of this, the playing field's not level. That's really the essential answer. They buy tours. They shouldn't be allowed to buy tours. And when they buy a tour, they're paying more for that tour. And that means that the more they pay the artist because they're trying to get control of the tour, it gets passed along to the consumer. So the consumer gets harmed really badly. When you talk about ticketing fees, you know, dynamic pricing, platinum, these are all things Live Nation's come up with. And think about this and something you don't even realize. Now, all of a sudden, Live Nation comes up with a scheme a couple years ago. Let's charge more money for the 2 tickets on the end of each aisle. Or let's charge more money for the front row of that arena that has multiple tiers. So all these things are done at the expense of the consumer. So that's why it needs to be broken up.
Thank you, and thanks to our colleagues for this great hearing.
Thanks, Senator Klobuchar. I'm going to yield now to Congressman Raskin. And
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Klobuchar, for participating with us today. It's been great working with you on this. Let's see. So, Attorney General Bonta, let me start with you. We had a huge breakthrough when this went to a jury, and I want you to just talk to us about the importance of America's miraculous and beloved jury system and why it's so critical in this field.
Sure. And I'll say this, in antitrust cases, there's often a waiver of the right to a jury, and we go to a judge. So you try the case to a bench. But we wanted to try this case to a jury. We thought it was important to get a cross-section of America to look at this case, and we thought that a jury would channel the views of the American people and would look at this fairly, thoughtfully, and come to a conclusion. And again, on that 11-page jury verdict form with the 33 questions they found for us on every single issue. I think there's a lot of anger in this country about experiences on Ticketmaster, which are absolutely awful, and the jury channeled, I think, some of that thoughtfulness and anger combined.
So, you know, the antitrust law is opaque to a lot of people. It's complicated. It's difficult. But this case is something everybody can understand.
Yeah.
And if we actually go forward and not only win on the verdict on all of those different counts and causes of action, but if there's an effective remedy, could this be the breakthrough moment for America reclaiming antitrust law across the economy?
It could. And we won't know if we don't fight. If like the US DOJ, you're caving and settling and not even trying and fighting for the American people. The next phase goes to the bench, and so the judge will decide the remedies. And again, we're going to ask for structural remedies, and we believe that Ticketmaster Live Nation has had a chance with the behavioral remedies. They haven't worked. So yes, this is our hope, but it's also an important moment. If you look more broadly outside of Ticketmaster Live Nation, we're in the middle of a case with Nexstar Tegna. We've already secured a preliminary injunction in that case when it comes to broadcasting local news. We're looking at Paramount Warner Brothers right now and are very concerned. We have our own case against Amazon for price fixing. It is the constellation of multiple cases in one time in this moment in history where we need to stand up and fight for the American people. We need to be anti-monopolists here. We need to be for a free and fair market and against a rigged market. And the states, at least the Democratic states, with some Republican states, are standing firm in that breach.
Well, thank you much for your hard work on this. Professor Alford, yeah, I'm proud that my party stands when we're hanging tough for our principles, for democracy and free markets against monarchy and oligarchy and monopoly. And I'm proud of you that you stood for those things too, even though you're a Republican, but you're saying you're standing up for a majority of Republicans who really believe in the principles of antitrust law and genuinely free markets that are not controlled by monopolists and their friends who are essentially political monopolists. They want monarchy over democracy. I wonder if you would give us a more detailed sense of what is actually going on in terms of the Department of Justice. We've read that there are former Trump administration officials like Kellyanne Conway and Mike Davis who are not antitrust law experts, who are intimately involved in these decisions and that are lobbying. But why, first of all, I didn't even know that people lobbied antitrust decisions. That's like lobbying a police officer about a speeding ticket where you send in, a lobbying team from the Beltway to go lobby. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. But in any event, we've been reading that they are a dominant force now, and I wonder if you could describe to us what's going on.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's a very serious problem. I've spoken out about it on 2 separate occasions, and this is now my 3rd opportunity to do so. I think it's unprecedented. We've seen lobbyists try in the past to have influence over law enforcement matters, but to have this level of success is truly shocking. I mean, I was so surprised by it. I sold my house in July, knowing I assumed that they will back me up when we take a strong stand. But to my amazement, senior officials at the Pam Bondi's office basically overruled us because of recommendations from lobbyists that have no idea whatsoever about the antitrust laws. And literally they just say things like, well, we're close to friends in the White House, or we're close to people at the cabinet level. And we know that they want us to resolve cases, because they're deal makers. And we're like, well, what about what the merits of the law requires? What about the actual economic analysis necessary? What about the recommendations of the expert economists and the career attorneys and economists? So it's a very serious problem. And I spoke out early in the hope that it would not get to this point on a case of such gravitas for the American public, but alas, it's not happened.
I met someone who came to talk to me about a very similar situation, saying that there were big money lobbyists tied in politically with Trump who came on one side, so then the other side got some big money lobbyists associated with Trump. And I said, well, what do you do when you've got the big money on both sides? And he said, well, we're hoping they'll just have to decide it on the merits. But who knows, I mean, that's a pretty pathetic place for us to be, that the only chance of getting something decided on the merits is if you have, equally situated millionaire or billionaire lobbyists on either side. So if corporations can get a mere slap on the wrist for monopolistic practices by hiring lobbyists who have insider influence with the Department of Justice, what's the incentive to comply with the antitrust laws at all?
I think there has to be external checks. There has to be congressional oversight. There has to be state attorneys general that are willing to step up and basically be responsive to the absence of enforcement at the federal level. It's been extremely encouraging to see what the state AG's bipartisan state AG enforcement has happened.
Yes.
And private sector enforcement. All of those things are checks that I think have to happen.
And that's what's happening today. Of course, the majorities in either chamber are not interested in enforcing antitrust law, much less exposing the corruption that now saturates the Trump administration. So we're holding this shadow hearing, and we've gone to all of you as serious activists in the field who are exponents for what the law is, and the state attorney general. It's been suggested that you and Assistant Attorney General Slater actually agreed with the settlement that the Department of Justice ultimately reached. There are conservative sources claiming that you supported it, and you've just changed your position on it. Is that true?
No, I published an op-ed in the Bloomberg just last month saying that this was a great victory for the state AGs and a travesty for the Department of Justice. And I know that Gail Slater said, we will do settlements, but they have to be real serious settlements. We're not going to do settlements that don't address the market. And the fact that I think the lobbyists did everything they could in their power to get rid of Gail Slater on the eve of the trial is very telling. Her recent op-ed in the Rolling Stone magazine very dramatically praised the state attorneys general for their verdict.
All right, good. Just one final question, and then I'm going to turn it back to you, Senator, and then we'll go to Congresswoman Jayapal. Maybe we'll have a chance for a second round. But the president has been asserting repeatedly that he has control through the unitary executive theory over everything that goes on in the executive branch of government. And if you follow that to its logical destination, and it's not that far really from what he's saying, he's going to decide all of these antitrust conflicts himself. Perhaps, Mr. Mickelson, let me pose this to you. You've been an opponent of both oligarchy and monarchy and standing up. Now what we've got is monarchy supporting oligarchy. But what happens if President Trump actually gets his way with this gerrymandered, spliced and diced Supreme Court, and they say, yes, the president can personally resolve all of these antitrust conflicts and lawsuits?
Well, thank you for asking the question. I think that I'd rather turn that over to Mr. Bonta, who would be able to
All
answer
right, I'll come to you.
better than me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know it's the president's theory, but it's a fringe theory, which isn't supported by the law. I know that some folks have doubted the ability of state AGs, once we get to the U.S. Supreme Court, to prevail, but we've prevailed on some of the biggest issues, like his centerpiece economic policy, tariffs struck down by this U.S. Supreme Court, National Guard unlawfully deployed into our cities. That was found in our favor by the U.S. Supreme Court. Prop 50 in California, major redistricting decision by the people found in our favor. So I guess I'll push back on the presumption that this U.S. Supreme Court would find that unitary executive theory to be lawful and appropriate. But if it does, it's very dangerous. You know, this has to be done based on the merits, based on the law, based on the facts. Let the chips fall where they may. It's not about who has higher paid, higher powered lobbyists. It's to your point. It's like lobbying on a criminal prosecution. You don't lobby on that. You just look at the facts and look at the law and apply the law to the facts and make a decision. That's it. So it's dangerous what he's proposing. He's got sort of one foot in the door already with the influence he's trying to exert on many of these cases. So, you know, to the point of Mr. Alford, we've stepped in the breach as AGs to exercise our concurrent jurisdiction. We share the jurisdiction that the U.S. DOJ has, and if they're not going to exercise it, we will.
Great. And I'll revert to you, Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you. Mr. Mickelson, we've been talking a lot about law and about some concepts that may seem a little bit arcane to the average American who may be watching. It's really about money and profits and exploitation. People this summer are going to be unable to afford tickets, or they're going to be paying $400 when they ought to be able to buy a ticket for $35. That's a real discrepancy that came to me this morning from the owner of the Warner Theater, from real life. This is money flowing to Ticketmaster and Live Nation from the artists, from the fans, from the venue owners. It's a great big flow of money. That sucking sound you hear is dollars going to Ticketmaster, Live Nation, correct?
Correct. And don't forget that their business model is that they've got three revenue streams: concerts, ticketing, and sponsorship. They lose money in concerts. They don't, and make it in ticketing and sponsorship. So they could lose $50 million in a year in concerts. And there was one year they made $580 in ticketing and sponsorship, so their net was $530 million. So yes, it doesn't matter to them what they pay the artist as long as they control the artist, so they can put them in their venues or at least a Ticketmaster venue and charge whatever they want to charge because they're making so much money in the other two segments.
And I think if I'm correct, this company even, in effect, took advantage of COVID because a lot of the venues were very hard-pressed during COVID. The audiences were unable to go. And so the pressure on those venues was all the more impactful in COVID. Am I correct?
You are correct, and let me bring up one more point that goes along with COVID. There was one company that refused to refund the money that consumers paid for tickets, Ticketmaster. 90% of their shows were postponed, and they refused to refund the money that the people were clamoring for. And it wasn't until, and I can't recall who it was in the Senate or the House, until they, it was, I think it was Representative Porter, started to make a public outcry. It wasn't until that occurred that forced them to refund money. So here's a company that didn't give a damn about the consumer. It's about them.
And this exploitation of consumers, the concert goers, the fans, wasn't really a surprise, was it? In fact, when the merger occurred, there were many, you and I among them, who warned about exactly what has happened. And then there were 2 consent decrees, court orders. These are orders by a judge. Don't mess up. Do the right thing. And they just blew right through them, correct?
They ignored them. I don't know if blew right through them, but they ignored them and operated in their own style, which is them first, not the consumer. The consumer means nothing to them except they're just their piggy bank, and that's all they are, just a piggy bank.
Now, I would like to believe that we're on the verge of a breakthrough and that we're going to see this turnaround in enforcement. But we're not going to see it from this Department of Justice, I feel fairly secure, because there is a history here. And Professor Alford, you recite some of the cases. HPE Juniper, Compass Anywhere Real Estate, Nexstar Tegna. There's not only a history here, but what we're seeing is corporate giants having their way because the administration has succumbed to the lobbyists and the fixers, not to the law, not following the law. Would you agree?
Yes, I provide details of that in my written testimony. All 4 of those examples are great examples where the decision was not made on the merits, in my opinion. It was made based on lobbying and political connections. And the great risk for the Department of Justice is that they're going to lose their presumption of regularity, and they're not abiding by, we talked about unitary executive, they're not abiding by their obligation to take care that the laws are faithfully executed.
There have been published reports, one of them was mentioned by Congressman Raskin, that some pretty bold-faced names have been involved in the lobbying here. Are you familiar with those names?
Yes, I am.
And what are they?
So it depends on the matter that you're talking about, but in terms of this particular case, we know that Kellyanne Conway and Mike Davis were lobbyists advocating for a very, very weak settlement. And we know that former board member Ariel Emanuel, as well as current board member Rick Grinnell, were all advocating. And according to published reports, Ariel Emanuel met directly with the President of the United States to try to get this case settled. And it settled in a matter of a day.
So what I hear you saying, and it's pretty clear from your testimony, these published reports indicate that the President himself may have been involved in this decision to throw in the towel and give Ticketmaster Live Nation this sweetheart deal, correct?
Yes, the judge specifically said, I want to make sure that all communications that any representative for Live Nation Ticketmaster had with any government official, including the President, are going to be provided as part of the 16G disclosure under the Tunney Act.
And as part of the review of this proposed settlement, there is a so-called Tunney Act proceeding. Tunney Act is an act of Congress that requires review by the district court judge who's heard the evidence, who knows the case. He knows why the jury, in effect, found liability or guilt here. If I were this judge, I'd be pretty angry, wouldn't you?
He's already said he's angry. And as I said earlier, the amazing thing about this case, for the first time, I think, in modern antitrust law, we have a liability finding where the judge is required under the law to fashion remedies that will fix the market, and at the same exact time, look at this settlement and see whether or not it's in the public interest. So this is a very, very propitious time to look at the Tunney Act and whether it's up to adequate to the task.
And not only would I be angry if I were the judge, I'd be angry if I were a concert goer, a fan, or the American public.
Yes, if you look at the ex-post that the Antitrust Division posted congratulating the state AGs, the level of anger that the public shared with respect to that, where they merely were congratulating the state AGs, but they basically said, you're trying to jump in front of the parade and take credit. You did nothing, and the state AGs are the ones that stepped up.
Attorney General Bonta, you are an elected official, as I was when I served as Attorney General. You listen to the people of California. Your colleagues around the country listen to their constituents. They hearing the same message, this anger and, frankly, outrage about the so-called Department of Justice doing injustice.
Absolutely. American consumers are pissed off. They're angry. They don't want to be treated unfairly. They want to be treated lawfully, with dignity, with respect, and they deserve that. And when the US DOJ throws in the towel and gives into, promotes, supports the mistreatment of American consumers, they're even more angry. And, you know, frankly, some are worried and anxious and wondering, is this just what they're going to be left with? Is anyone going to fight for us? Is anyone going to stand up for what's right and hold these corporations accountable when they break the law? And our answer for state AGs is a resounding yes. We'll fight for you. You deserve it. We'll stand up for you. But they are angry.
Because at a time when Americans are struggling to make ends meet, prices at the pump are skyrocketing, as I found this morning in Connecticut. They've risen from $2.90 a gallon to more than $4.60 a gallon. I'm sure even more in California when
over $6.
Americans are struggling to put food on the table. Again, rising prices due to this war of choice in Iran. When they go for a little entertainment and music, Professor Alford, as you said, is good for the soul, but these concerts also bring together communities. They bring people together. It's one of the places where people of different races, religions, national background, wealth, come together, they're side by side, they share a moment of joy at a place like the Crowbar. And they're being priced out, not only by the war in Iran, when they try to get there by car, when they try to buy something to eat, but now by the continued exploitive predatory practices of Ticketmaster, Live Nation.
That's right.
Chairman Raskin.
I'm going to turn it over now to Representative Pramila Jayapal, who's the chair of our subcommittee on antitrust and I always forget the rest of it.
I was.
Oh,
Thank
you
you so
was.
much, Representative Raskin.
And thank you for
Senator-
hanging in there.
Absolutely, and thank you, Senator Blumenthal, as well. Thank you so much to all of our witnesses. I think this is a really important hearing, and you've all raised incredibly important points. Many of you have spoken about how this has always been actually a bipartisan issue. And I remember when I was the vice chair of the Antitrust Subcommittee in 2019 on the House Judiciary Committee, we launched a 16-month investigation of big tech companies. It was completely bipartisan. We passed through the committee on a bipartisan basis a full suite of bills to take on big tech monopolies. And that time seems to be far gone, unfortunately. But I think, you know, one of the struggles we always have is how do we make this relevant to the American people? A lot of people don't know what antitrust means, but they do know what fairness means. And they certainly know how important music is within their lives, which I think is why this particular case has generated so much attention. During those hearings, I had an analogy of a game that was being played on the field. You don't want the same person setting the rules for the game, calling all the plays on the field, and playing on one of the teams. That just would not be fair in anyone's mind, and I think that is what we consistently see. Now, on this issue, I also have to say I represent Seattle, Washington, and we are very proud of all of the history we have within the music industry, and certainly Pearl Jam, birthed right in Seattle in my district, and the first large band to boycott Ticketmaster, and of course testified here in Congress, because they understood what it would mean to our fans, to performers, and to our venues. We have a lot of independent venues across Seattle. You know, during Donald Trump's first term, the department was actually interested much more in antitrust and enforcement of federal antitrust laws. They were willing to continue landmark lawsuits to challenge some of the monopolies at that time. But unfortunately, as we've discussed, this has really changed. When Trump was elected for a second term, giant monopolists in the AI field, the pharmaceutical field, food industries, poured millions of dollars into his inaugural committee, even gifted him a 24-karat gold plaque. And in exchange, the administration in the second term has now pushed to eliminate or lessen regulations for these corporations and essentially shut down federal enforcement of antitrust laws that are desperately needed as consumers are facing higher prices on everything, from groceries to ticket prices. Corporations now know exactly what the game plan is to succeed here. Hire a mega-aligned lobbyist like Mike Davis to make giant contributions to Trump-affiliated campaigns and ventures, overstep the antitrust division, and go directly to senior Trump officials to dismiss or settle lawsuits and allow mergers to proceed. And who cares if it raises home prices on consumers or healthcare costs for Americans, or if it stacks the decks against small businesses? Because Donald Trump told us very plainly just a week ago that he doesn't care, he doesn't, this is his exact quote, think about Americans' financial situation. So, Professor Alford, I want to start with you. Last year, you really had a front row seat to this kind of pay-for-play strategy in the proposed merger between Hewlett-Packard and Juniper, two of the largest providers of wireless networking solutions. And you saw Mike Davis go to great lengths to pressure Gail Slater to abandon DOJ's lawsuit, blocking the merger, even threatening to, quote, destroy her career. And after resisting those efforts, Mr. Davis sidestepped you and Ms. Slater and went directly to senior DOJ officials who then pushed you both out of the department. That's not how antitrust enforcement is supposed to work. And so I want to ask you to just start by explaining why robust antitrust enforcement is important and should be supported regardless of your politics.
Yeah, vigorous antitrust enforcement is a bipartisan issue. It's one of the few things we can all agree about. It's one of the reasons why I'm happy to come here and talk about it, because it's an incredibly common Republican position to believe in free markets, but as part of the free market analysis, we recognize that there's market failure. And when there's market failure, that means monopoly abuse, cartel-like behavior, anti-competitive mergers. Republicans prefer antitrust over regulation, and so it's very common to be vigorous enforcers of it. And that's just not what we've seen in this administration.
I want to drill down a little bit on some of the lobbying efforts that we've spoken a little bit about, you've written about. Are you aware of reports that Live Nation donated $500,000 to Trump's inaugural committee?
Yes.
And are you aware of reports that Live Nation elected Rick Grinnell to its board and hired Mike Davis and Kellyanne Conway to lobby on the company's behalf?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, while you were at the department, did Kellyanne Conway and Rick Grinnell roam the agency's office to meet the same DOJ officials who pushed you out?
Yes.
Are you aware of reports that President Trump urged his aides to settle DOJ's lawsuit against Live Nation?
Based on public reports, yes.
And are you aware of reports that 1 week into the trial, DOJ agreed to settle the lawsuit and dropped its demand to break up the company?
Yes.
Are you aware of reports that the settlement was a complete surprise to both the DOJ's lead trial counsel and the judge?
Yes. Yes,
And
I am.
taking all those facts together, do you believe that undue political influence resulted in the settlement rather than the merits of the case?
Yes, I think the jury spoke to the merits of the case.
This federal abandonment really does have dire consequences for American consumers, except that we have this incredible bipartisan coalition of state AGs that has stepped up with courage and with diligence. So Attorney General Bonta, obviously you lead law enforcement in California, one of the states that decided to continue the trial, along with my home state of Washington, our AG as well, Nick Brown. Can you walk us through the immediate aftermath of the DOJ settlement and why you decided to continue the trial that led to a successful jury verdict?
Absolutely. And to be clear, our preference is to work collaboratively with a U.S. DOJ and an FTC that are taking on these cases based on the merits, but if they're going to allow for undue influence and improper lobbying to lead to the outcomes, then we can't. And so we got to fight for the people the way we know how, which is based on the facts and the law and objective application of the antitrust law. You know, when we were in trial, there was a time when our US DOJ, who was a partner, we launched the case under the Biden administration and continued it under the Trump administration, but the US DOJ basically went dark. They were quiet. They weren't communicating with us, and we're not naive. We thought something was afoot, something that potentially improper or insufficient. And when they emerged with a settlement, we realized that we were right. And you know, we were willing to continue the case with the US DOJ despite some concerns and some red flags. And trust is built. And they burned all the trust when they did that in the middle of the trial. And they left us, they bailed. They left us hanging. And we're a team. And they left their teammates. And so we had to, the remaining states, gather together, see who was still in, look at our resources that we had to carry the case forward, ask for a small, short continuance from the trial judge so we could gather ourselves and prepare. And then we fought on, as we should, and started calling witnesses and eliciting testimony and bringing our case and cross-examining their witnesses. And that was the appropriate thing to do. But the way the US DOJ treated the states, that's not the way teammates treat each other. It was without communication, it was disrespectful, it was weak in the way that they settled the case, and they left us flat-footed for a moment, but we regrouped quickly, and we're proud of the result that we were able to get. We quickly assessed that their settlement was very insufficient and not worthy of what the American people deserve in this case. And we were able to fight for more, and we got more.
Are you aware of any company in American history that's been granted a merger after failing to abide by behavioral remedies and antitrust consent decrees 2, let alone 3 times? I'll address that either to you or to Professor Alford.
I'm not.
Nor am I.
Yeah, it's really unprecedented. Mr. Mickelson, you're an independent concert producer. We appreciate everything you've done, and venue operator who described very powerfully, I think, the brunt of Live Nation Ticketmaster's anti-competitive practices. How does that affect your ability to draw artists to you and to put on shows?
We are shut out of the industry that I have spent my entire life in. I am sitting on the sidelines watching the industry go by in front of me. They're taking bands from me that we have historical relationships. We don't even get calls from agents that we used to deal with every day. We're out of the bidding process. We're not part of the industry. We will be soon only producing tribute bands the way it's going. So it's pretty disheartening to be in a business you love and not be able to participate in a meaningful way. Fortunately, we have a few relationships with certain artists, whether it's Bruce Springsteen or AC/DC or Foo Fighters, but those are dwindling. We've lost thousands of shows over the course of time because of their anti-competitive conduct.
And I'll address this to you, Mr. Mickelson, Mr. Nicolai. You spoke so powerfully about what it means for your consumers, your fans, as you said, or to you, Mr. DeGeorge. But how does this ultimately affect your fans, your consumers, and the effect on music itself as an industry?
Sure. I mean, it benefits us. We're talking about Live Nation and Ticketmaster that are operating on the upper levels of the music businesses from the artist point of view. But to grow musicians to get to that level, you need a healthy ecosystem of smaller venues, of alternative venues, of venues of different sizes, of venues that work with different genres. And if those venues are squeezed out of particular markets, then they're not going to have the bands that grow even to the level where they have to worry about Live Nation and Ticketmaster. And to the extent that Mr. DeGeorge was talking about having to compete in terms of guarantees with Live Nation, those costs trickle down to fans as well. You know, you have to raise the ticket prices, you have to charge more for for drinks and amenities at the club, and it hurts everybody.
Did you want to say something?
You know, once again, I just want to say I'm a 300 cap venue. Prior to the pandemic, for me to even be speaking about the impact that Live Nation and Ticketmaster and the resale market and the secondary market and scalping tickets have on my business would be unheard of. This happened very quickly. And these small rooms that we have that aren't those corporate giants are the community spaces in every neighborhood across the country, and they are corroding. They are dying. They are falling apart. In my community, where we've lost all these independent venues, people are screaming to have them. They don't want Live Nation in there. They want our rooms. They want the same rooms you have in Seattle and all over the country. My story is no different than any other small DIY space around the United States, because what we know from our State of Live data is 65% of us right now are unsustainable. And a big reason why we're not sustainable is because of Live Nation and Ticketmaster. So what we have to do is we have to break them up as best as possible, divest them, the ticketing, the promotion, the sponsorship, the artist management, it all has to be separated. They can't collude. Something serious has to happen, or we're going to lose our venues. And if we lose our venues, the bands are going to suffer and the fans suffer. And we cannot let that happen. To have a healthy ecosystem, everything has to start from the bottom up, not from the top down. And right now, the only people that are eating are the hogs at the top, and it's got to stop.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate this hearing, and I look forward to a successful suit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jayapal. Mr. Nikolai, what do your fans say? And I want to ask the same question to you, Mr. DeGeorge. What do your customers say? To what extent do they understand this as an exercise of monopoly power that's squeezing the ticket prices in the venues?
They understand when ticket prices go up. They understand when fees magically appear at the end of a transaction. We don't want them to have to think about this other stuff. Frankly, I don't want to have to think about this other stuff. I want to have to think about, how the chord resolves in the bridge of the song. But, if we have a situation where, for example, not to get too in the weeds of my band's business, but due to post-pandemic Ticketmaster policies, if we have multiple shows in a city in a weekend and we want to offer other things like a merchandise bundle, we ran into a situation where Ticketmaster was forcing us to offer these items a la carte so they could charge a separate fee for a guitar workshop, a meet and greet, a merch bundle, which again, they have no role in producing or fulfilling. Rather than one fee for a bundled transaction. And we found ways, eventually, it took us a couple of years to find ways around that. But then we have to explain to fans why, the way we found around it was through a fan club with a subscription. We had to explain to them about the subscription. It causes more friction between us and the fans.
Yeah. Mr. DeGeorge, how about you?
I think the fans do understand what's going on. I think, when you have venues that are closing, that's very powerful. People see that and they go, what's happening? So much like you said, it's not like I want to be the advocate or the educator to all the people in my community and what's happening, but I know that unless we educate the fans on what's happening and get caught up very quickly, venues are going to continue to close, which is going to, deplete the market. And so I'm proud to say that in Tampa, and I think in a lot of our cities, because of our small venues speaking up and advocating for real change, people do see what's happening and they do want change. Currently, right now, That Live Nation venue that just announced it was going to be opening in my neighborhood after forcing myself and all the other venues that were in that market out, we just put out a petition just a couple weeks ago, and it's already up to over 3,000 signatures. I've probably done 3 interviews a week. I'm going to be speaking in front of the neighborhood associations next week. I'm going to be speaking in front of city council, telling them why this is a bad idea to let Live Nation into our market. We're fighting tooth and nail every single day to protect our livelihoods, and that's why we need real support and real help from the government.
So but just to be clear, it's not certain that Crowbar will be closing?
I'm closing, but whether I stay open or not, I am dedicated to this industry. And, you know, I also have a promotions company. Maybe I want to open up a new room at some point in my life. None of that's possible if things keep continuing the way they are.
Yeah.
You know?
And just one final point on this, Mr. George. Did you feel as if it was a deliberate effort to drive you out of business, or it was just the expansion of these larger impersonal
I don't
forces?
even think we're thought of. You know, I think I'm an afterthought to the people at Live Nation. I'm expendable.
Yeah.
And that's why I wholeheartedly disagree, because I think our smallest rooms are the most important rooms that create a healthy ecosystem. But no, I don't think they think of me at all.
Yeah. Okay, but Professor Alford, how has the lapse in antitrust enforcement, the demoralization of the antitrust lawyers, the penetration of the antitrust division by lobbying and political influence, how has all of that affected the pocketbooks of consumers in other sectors of the economy? We've heard a lot about it in terms of what's taking place in the live music and entertainment industry. But are we finding the same kinds of things? Are people experiencing the same jump in prices?
Yeah, so if you look at my Senate Judiciary testimony in December, just before the change in administration, you could feel my enthusiasm about addressing pocketbook issues for the average American. If you look at the budget, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, where people spend their money, housing, entertainment, food, transportation, those kinds of issues, and we were committed. AG Slater and I were committed to deal with pocketbook issues that really matter to the average American. When we talk about being a populist Republican administration, we were talking about trying to deal with the things that the average, rural, non-college educated, working class American that voted for President Trump for economic reasons wanted us to address, and they're just not being addressed. The Compass Anywhere merger getting through without even an investigation is a dramatic example of housing costs just being completely ignored. But that doesn't matter to the current DOJ. We have Stanley Woodward, the Associate Attorney General, literally going down to New Orleans to try to convince Republican state AGs to accept a settlement in Live Nation Ticketmaster that will do absolutely nothing. And to their credit, 60% of the Republican state AGs said no.
Wow. Well, just as if a lot of people have felt left behind by the tariffs and by the Iran war, a lot of people are starting to feel left behind by these pro-monopolistic practices of the Department of Justice. Okay, I get to turn it back over to Senator Blumenthal, and then we're coming to Ms. Kamlager-Dove right after that.
Thanks. Professor Alford, sounds to me like this is kind of a classic potential instance of corruption that cries out for an investigation by the Inspector General of the Department of Justice. Would you agree?
So there needs to be some sort of external checks. I outlined in my written testimony the different types of external checks. And, you know, I think congressional oversight, I think state attorneys general, I think increased private enforcement. My understanding is that the DOJ Inspector General is not particularly active right now, so I'm not sure how successful that would be. But we do need various external checks.
Well, this week, we're going to have a hearing with the President's nominee for Inspector General of the Department of Justice. I think this line of questioning would be perfectly appropriate. I hope you agree.
Yes, I mean, when I was fired, I considered filing a complaint to the Inspector General, but decided that it would not be fruitful to do so. And so,
well, we're going to ask for it. We're going to insist on it. We're going to demand it. And I hope we have a responsive nominee later this week. Attorney General Bonta, I know you have to leave at about 5:30. I just want to ask whether you would like to make some closing remarks.
I would, and let me just first say, I really appreciate the testimony of my fellow panelists, the courage, the clarity that you've shown in the face of very difficult circumstances that I'm sorry that you've had to endure is inspiring and inspires me to do more of this important work. I want to thank you for having us and talking about this issue. I'm glad there's people watching and that you have some real focus. I think that audience is a testament to the anger, how people are feeling right now. And to both of your points, Congressmember and Senator, this is a president who says, I don't think about Americans' financial situation, and he has the receipts to show it. Whether it be the Iran war or 2 sets of unlawful tariffs or the failure to enforce anti-monopoly law, all of which raise prices for Californians and Americans, he's showing that he's a man of his word, at least when it comes to that statement. Not others necessarily, but that statement. And it's incumbent upon us to step into this breach left by an absent DOJ and FTC that are abdicating their responsibility and to fight for the American people. They're screaming for fighters to make their lives more affordable, and we're here to respond and answer that call, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with you.
Thank you. Anytime you have to leave, please know that we are very, very grateful for your being here.
Thank you. I can stay a little longer because my flight's delayed, so thank you.
Okay. Mr. DeGeorge, I am really so impressed and inspired by your story. Majoring in criminal justice at Penn State, working in some live music venues in college, then when you were a security intern at the Olympics in Atlanta, you visited a music venue called the Masquerade. You loved it. You got involved there. And live music has been your life. You brought a lot of joy to people. Your parents thought you were crazy. But I'll bet they were proud of you. I know your dad passed away. What does this do to you as a human being? As a small business person, you have actually led the Chamber of Commerce in Tampa. You have led the small venues and large in the effort to secure $16.2 billion in the Save Our Stages program. I'm very familiar with it because I helped to lead that effort here in the United States Senate. And it was vital to preserve venues during that time of challenge when Ticketmaster, Live Nation were trying to exploit the pandemic rather than help the venues. So you are a figure in this industry. You're the face and voice of a lot of business people who are trying to make it go and actually trying to help the concert goers and the fans at a time when they are paying more than ever for everything because of the Iran war of choice. Donald Trump promised we wouldn't have a forever war. Now we have a whatever war that seems to be lasting forever, but it's inflicting pain on American consumers. And I'd like to know what the closing of your venue, the Crowbar, on July 31st of this year will mean for you.
It's 20 years of my life. It's 20 years of my life, day in and day out, being in that venue. As a matter of fact, I was probably in that venue almost every single day up until the pandemic and then Save Our Stages, because now when I am away from it, I'm here doing stuff like this, fighting for the survival really of our entire industry. I wish we weren't here right now, but since we are, I'm happy that I'm the one here in this moment. We have the National Independent Venue Association has thousands of members that are struggling. that had successful, sustainable businesses before the pandemic. And so regardless of the closure of my room, as I've said, I know that those same people are in every city, in every state around the country, and they're hurting. And when venues like Crowbar hurt, or the Happy Dog in Cleveland, or Exit Inn that Chris Cobb owned in Nashville, or First Ave in Minneapolis, Minnesota, when they're all struggling, community struggles at the end of the day. Independent venues are connected to their communities, unlike any other business, I think. And Live Nation certainly doesn't connect with their communities like that. They're not going to be the first ones to open up when there's times of trouble. People don't flock there in times of celebration. And that's what makes independent venues so important. Not only are they huge economic drivers for their cities, but they're cultural institutions and safe spaces, and we're losing them right now. And so many years after Crowbar is gone, I will be doing whatever I can to help them and our members. And hopefully that fight won't be much longer, and hopefully we'll be sustainable again. And our businesses can not only struggle to survive, but start to thrive.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Nicolai, people may not appreciate how tough a business music is. Music is a really tough business. What they see are the stars, Taylor Swift making billions. But I've known some of the artists who have struggled, and you've seen it firsthand. It is a really grinding, challenging business, physically, emotionally, financially. And when Ticketmaster Live Nation profits by exploiting the resale market and forcing artists to release their tickets there first, it affects what they earn as well as what the venues earn, and it affects what the fans pay and what they think of the artist. Am I correct?
Yeah, and one of the effects is that, one of the byproducts is that artists are made to feel that if we're not pricing tickets as high as we possibly can, we're leaving that extra revenue on the table for extractive third parties to collect. And those of us who come, the music business is a funny combination of business and art, right? And it has these utopian ideals that we want to balance with the business necessities of it. And so one of the effects of the influence of companies like Live Nation and Ticketmaster is to try to drive a wedge between that community of artist and fan, and we have to be able to retain that as much as we can.
Mr. Mickelson, you probably have a certain sense of deja vu. You weren't in this committee room. You were in another room not far from here in this building when the representatives of Ticketmaster Live Nation testified. And in effect, they said then what they are saying now: trust us, we'll do the right thing. Should we trust them?
Good question. It's hard for many fans to trust them, but they have no choice. So it's not a matter of trust to the fan. It's a matter of it's put upon them. They have nothing they can do about it, and yet there is something that can be done about it, if, as we've discussed today. But, would you trust Bernie Madoff to make your investments? No. We've seen what they do. They disregard every decree. They don't care about the fan. I thought of another charge, cut the line. You pay for cutting the line, Nobody ever charged that before. Nobody ever charged for aisle seats or front row seats. I mean, you don't put extra charges. So can you trust them? No, you can't trust them, and that's why structural remedies are the only thing that can help the consumer and help competition.
Conduct remedies haven't worked. Structural remedies are absolutely necessary. And I think that's why we're here today and why we're counting on the state attorneys general to be tough and strong, as I know they will be.
Well, can I add one thing? Again, I brought it up before. The Paramount decree worked. The Paramount, when they broke up Paramount, independent operators, movie operators, could then go back in business and actually have a business when they were being excluded because the studios tied up the actors exclusively, they had the theaters, they had the distribution network. And part of what the government did was not just break that up, but when they would block book, they banned block booking so that every city had to have bids for all the movies that go into the theater as opposed to block booking. So I think that's an important part is Paramount. Look at Paramount. That's good law.
Thank you. Attorney General Bonta, just before you go, and I turn it over to Ms. Kamlager-Dove, one final question. Will you just give us a sense of procedurally where we are in terms of the case and what the public can expect to see going forward now?
Yes, as mentioned, the case is bifurcated. We finished the first phase, the liability phase with the jury. Now we're on to the remedies phase with the judge. By the end of this month, we'll have made our requests for what the remedies should be, and you should expect to see requests for structural remedies as part of what we request. And then there's the Tunney Act review and process to review the U.S. DOJ's, what we believe is an inadequate settlement. And then later this fall, we'll start getting some final resolution. So it's still a few months out, but we're moving now on the process of preparing our request for remedies.
Thank you for your great hard work. Ms. Kamlager-Dove.
Thank you, Ranking Member Raskin and Senator Blumenthal for putting on this hearing. So I represent Los Angeles. Attorney General Bonta is my AG, and Los Angeles is the entertainment capital of the world. It's no secret that music is the heartbeat of that industry. Live entertainment, economic engine, it's how people make their livelihoods, and it's also where millions of Americans participate in celebrations and joyful experiences. So, Attorney General, I know you have to go, and this will be my question to you before you leave us. You've made it clear that Live Nation Ticketmaster has exploited its monopoly power to raise prices, to limit choices, and to undermine fair competition. From California's perspective, what should Congress understand about the broader harm to workers, consumers, and creative economies when consolidation like this goes unchecked?
All of those entities get hurt. Artists, fans, consumers, businesses that just want to compete on a level playing field and have an opportunity because of their product to succeed. And that's what we're safeguarding here, a free and fair market. And that's what Ticketmaster, Live Nation have interfered with and disrupted and undermined. And this isn't an opinion. There's laws, rules of the road, and a jury found them completely liable for violating it. So everyone gets hurt except for Ticketmaster Live Nation, who rakes in the profits based on their unlawful conduct. And this is an issue that I think is very accessible to many people who've been online trying to buy a ticket on the Ticketmaster website and paid more than they thought they should and thought something was fishy. And this vindicates their belief. It wasn't just fishy, it was unlawful. And we have proven that with our case. And so we're trying to prevent all that harm that's being visited on all those different entities, businesses and consumers and artists, and make the free market work again.
Thank you so much. And I just want to thank you for your vision and your courage and for shepherding this and also for leading the fights that California has been in. Just on behalf of all of your constituents, I want to say thank you. I also want to say your hair's changed since I last saw you.
Thank you, Congressmember. Great to see you.
Meaning in color, yes, because we've all been working so hard against this administration. Professor Alford, you've described the DOJ's Live Nation settlement as a textbook case of selective non-prosecution, a powerful corporation leveraging political connections to escape real accountability. So given the damage that this kind of interference does to public trust, to workers, and to consumers, what concrete guardrails must Congress put in place to ensure that antitrust enforcement can never be bent to serve the politically connected corporations at the expense of the American people?
Yeah, so I do talk about that in my written testimony. I think that Congress has a very important role. Obviously, oversight hearings are the most important. I think hearings of this kind right here are also very significant. I do think that proposed legislation, the Klobuchar-Raskin proposal for revisions to the Tunney Act, I think are a very, very welcome suggestion. I think Senator Booker has also introduced legislation to suggest that they're going to take a hard look at all of the mergers that were approved and in a future year consider undoing those mergers as well. So the Congress has a very important role. Obviously the courts as well and the state AGs and the private sector.
Thank you. And my last question will be for Mr. Mickelson, or Mickelson? Which one?
Mickelson.
Mickelson.
Phil is Mickelson, I'm
Very
Mickelson.
good. Very good. So you have documented that ticket prices skyrocketed as Live Nation expanded its control over tours and venues and ticketing. From your decades in the industry, what is the single biggest link between this concentration and the affordability crisis that fans are facing today?
If I understand the question are you asking how do we get from $26 in 1996 to $134 in 2025?
Yes, because when I was looking through the testimony and looking at some documentation, it was staggering, these jumps that have happened in ticket prices. And, you know, I'm a Beyonce fan. I like to go see her when I can, but the tickets are prohibitively expensive. And I think back to when I was a pup and it wasn't that, I didn't have to save that many paychecks to go. And it's like, well, I'm not getting anything massively different in the experience. So what is the link between this affordability crisis and not truly being able to get the tickets and this concentration? I mean, I literally have staff who get credit cards just so that they can put the ticket on the credit card because they do not have any money, but they want to have the experience and they want to celebrate the artist that they love. I think that's crazy because ultimately they're paying more than even the value of that ticket is worth, but I don't think that should be an option for folks in the first place.
The link is called Live Nation Ticketmaster, and they facilitate that link because they want to control the industry. And they can control the industry, as we've seen. Their playbook is pay the artists so much money they can't say no. And at that time, that's when it gets passed off the consumer. They can't, you know, it's kind of like if I give my kids, you know, if I serve them ice cream for dinner, they're going to say no? Of course not. So the artists are getting offered so much money that they're saying yes at the expense of the relationship they had with me. I'm not even a thought in their mind when the offers are coming in at ridiculously prices. But again, they pass it along to the consumer. It used to be, before there was a Live Nation, all of the agents, all of the managers would be concerned about what the consumer pays. That's not a discussion in 90% of the cases with the acts today.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank
With that, I yield back.
Thank you. You know, I just have a quick final question for Mr. DeGeorge and Mr. Nicolai. I've talked to a number of the venue owners and operators, and frankly, I've been told often they fear retaliation. A couple of artists have stood up to Ticketmaster. Pearl Jam, at the very outset in the 1990s, stood up to them on excessive booking fees. Professor Alford has said very eloquently that standing up for justice sometimes requires a professional and personal price. I wonder if you have found artists and venues fear retaliation.
Yeah, I definitely think that artists and venues, they're in a difficult position because if they are speaking up publicly, there's a possibility that they could get on the bad side, obviously, of Live Nation. I guess at my point where I'm at, I don't really have much to lose at this point. My venue's going to be closing in a few months. And once again, if I am able to do anything else, open up a venue in a new part of Tampa, in order for it to survive, we need real change, And so I think at the end of the day, too, when you do talk about justice, justice is tough, right? Sometimes you gotta stand up and talk about things, and be a little bit courageous, not knowing exactly what could come out of it. And, I just really care about this industry. I care about our communities. I care about the artists. And, just gonna keep talking about it.
I think some artists are reasonably worried about retaliation. Artists who expect are going to have to maintain a working relationship with Live Nation for the foreseeable future to be able to tour successfully, especially once you're playing venues or festivals of a certain size. Many other artists are understandably cynical after years of inadequate response. Even after this huge win, it's going to take some time for artists to believe that it's real. The tools of antitrust in the past have sometimes been used to prevent musicians from working together, and I want to credit Representative Ross for her Protect Working Musicians Act, which could go some ways towards helping that. And Live Nation has put work into convincing artists that there are allies in the fight against other problems, against predatory resale companies. We know from evidence that came out in the trial that that's not the case. That Live Nation has been complicit in encouraging predatory resale practices, and this becomes a key way that they maintain their monopoly. But it's been part of their strategy to keep some artists quiet about the harms we've experienced. I mean, basically, it comes down to, as I said before, we want partners who share our values.
That concludes my questions, and the Senate is now voting, so I'm going to have to run to the vote.
Thank you so much, Senator Blumenthal, for doing this.
I again want to thank Congressman Raskin and all of our witnesses. Very, very powerful.
And then I just have a closing question or two. On this last point, I've certainly heard from StubHub and some other secondary ticket businesses that they also are encountering the same kinds of predatory practices with respect to the secondary ticket pricing and practices and facility with which people can resell. I wonder if any of you have any comments or experience with that as well. Yes, please.
I'll say that in advance of this hearing downstairs in the cafeteria, I went to see if any of my band's upcoming tickets were for sale on resale markets. And I saw that both in Portland and Chicago, tickets that should be $50 tickets were on sale on resale for over $1,000.
Wow. Wow. I want to just close by applauding each of you for stepping forward and in different ways acting with a lot of courage and civic toughness and coming forward. I know, Mr. Nicolai, we reached out to a whole bunch of different musical artists, and you were the only one willing to come forward to do this. And Professor Alford, we know that you lost your job to I guess Pam Bondi was Attorney General last summer when all of that happened, and simply for standing up for the integrity of the rule of law and the Department of Justice. You've been pushed out, and we are indebted to you for coming forward to tell the truth about what's going on. And Mr. DeGeorge and Mr. Mickelson, I want to thank you both for coming from the inside of the live entertainment sector to explain to people what's going on. And Mr. Mickelson, you've been doing it for many decades. So we're grateful to you all, but we are determined to make sure that this victory in court becomes meaningful change. And with that, I want to just thank you, Senator Blumenthal, for being such a great champion and for having us over here on the Senate side. I yield back.
And I hope your courage is contagious, both with the court and with other advocates who will come forward. So it means a lot. And you were among the few who were willing to step forward, but I hope there'll be more. Thank you. And we are now going to adjourn this hearing. Thank you.